Okay, this is Delphina Nichols, and I'm doing the follow-up video for night one of the the 9 nights of Feminist Passover. Okay, and I'm gonna clarify the difference between what the standard is at the beginning and how the standard gradually changes with time. So, the first Exodus that I'm going to begin with is the Exodus of Sarai, who's also known as Sarah. And if we look at the book of Genesis, chapter 20, verses 11 through 12, in those verses, Abraham admits that his wife is actually his half sister. In the beginning of the story, he tells people that she's his sister, and he gets paid massive sums of money, and he gets slaves and gold and silver. He gets all these women servants to sleep with and men servants and all kinds of riches from passing his wife off on other men to avoid danger. It's almost like borderline prostitution, so he won't be at risk of other men trying to kill him to get that beautiful woman. And after he does this to his wife, the second time that he does it, basically passing her off and prostituting her to avoid danger, he finally admits that she's his half-sister that he married, where they could have, because in Genesis 20, 11 and 12 says, "And Abraham said, because I thought surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife." And we have to look at that in ancient times, it was very, very common in Egypt and in many nations all over the world for a person to marry their own biological sister just because she has a different mother. And even in today's world, Sangoma Credo Mutwa, he married his half-sister, and he's a celebrity, and he's referred to in a lot of UFO disclosure stuff. But, here we are in the year 2020. We have ships that can go to the moon. We have computers. We got all these kinds of technologies and knowledge and wisdom where we should be knowing better and doing better. But yet here we still have Sangoma Credo Mutwa married to his half-sister now in modern times, just like Abraham. So in the deliverance of Sarai, she's delivered out of her life in Babylon. She's delivered to go attempt to found a new life. And here we have she's a liar, her husband's a liar. They're both swingers. They're half siblings married to each other. The bar, they were both pagans starting out at the beginning of this whole thing. They were both pagans. So at the beginning of this thing, the bar is very, very, very low for both of them. They're just two half siblings and pagan, like most people in the world was at that time. And even in today's world, it's estimated that more than half of Pakistani people in England are married to a first cousin. So we can see when you look at Sangoma Mutwa, when you look at the Pakistanis in England, where more than half of them are married to a first cousin, and you look at even a lot of American families. Even in today's world, the standard is not set that much higher. So, and then there's also, there's all kinds of stuff I could go through, but I'm going to make this video short. But Abraham had actually gotten someone pregnant long before Hagar even came into the picture. And he was going to claim the baby and raise it and everything. And God was like, no, that child is not your heir. Your heir will be a child born from your seed and not some other man. So let me, and I'm sure like a lot of modern men, he probably wanted the illegitimate child that was some other man's baby to be the heir. But he probably wanted that because the mom was probably very beautiful, just like his wife. Hold on, I'm going to look it up here. Oh, where did I see it? I'm going to have to... I'm going to have to look it up another time because I highlighted it. It's here. I got to point it out. But there's, Book of Genesis chapter 15, verses 3 through 4. And Abram said, behold, to me you have given no seed, and one in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this will not be your heir, but he that will come from your own bowels will be your heir. So right there we see in the book of Genesis chapter 15, verses 3 through 4, Abraham has all these female servants and male servants from passing his half-sister off to another man, his half-sister wife, and he gets one of them pregnant in his own house. And it's not even his baby. He's sitting there thinking that woman's being faithful to him. And these women that sharing him, they're getting sexual relief from other men. So right there, again, the bar set very low. There's no request for Abraham or the female servants having sex with him to change their behavior. And Abraham narrowly misses making some other man's baby the heir of Israel. And this video would probably be an hour long if I went through every single detail. But the main point that I see here is that there was fighting and even some degree of killing in order to push Abraham and Sarai to get to their ultimate destination. And they did a lot of things that was not God's will. Because again, these are two pagans raised in a pagan society, and they're half siblings, which is still socially acceptable in a lot of families today. And, it was God doing the fighting to separate them from these wealthy men who were fixated on Sarai's beauty. It wasn't Abraham and Sarai striving to get to their final destination. It was God striving, because Abraham and Sarai, their standards were pretty low. As long as they had money and other people to lay up with, they were okay. They were not really all that committed on this journey. Like, yes, they were obedient to God and would keep moving forward when God would deliver them, but they were not these religious zealots who a lot of people thought that they were. These are people, they were being broken in very, very gently, because that's the only kind of life they knew. And again, aside from coming very, very close to making some other man's child the father of Israel, because Abraham was delusional, thinking all of his concubines was going to be faithful to him. And we're going to see this again later in the Bible. But anyway, at the very beginning, God tells Abraham, get out of your country, get out from your family, get out from your father's house to a land that I will show you. And I will make a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless you and curse him who curses you. And in you shall families of the earth be blessed. Okay, so right there, God is telling Abraham to leave his entire family. The same family that was okay with him marrying a half-sibling, just like all the other families in the ancient world. Okay? Just like some families today, like Credo Mutwa's family, they're okay with him marrying his biological sister just because she has a different mom. So right here, Abraham is told to leave all of it behind, leave his father's house, leave his father's people, leave his father's land. And did Abraham do it? No, he didn't. Because in the very... Hold on. Let's see. So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken unto him. So in the very next sentence, Abraham takes his nephew Lot with him when they leave. Okay, so here he is at the very beginning. He has no children, and he's told to leave everyone from his father's house. He's told to leave everything from the old life behind. And then Abram's like, oh no, I'm not sure if I should do that. So he picks his nephew. And what do we see later? And later on in the story, his nephew has escaped a city that got destroyed. And instead of moving on to a new community, after the destruction of the city and the death of his wife, the nephew just lays up in a cave, living with his 2 young adult daughters, having sex with both of them. And the story's written to claim that he didn't know what he was doing because he was old, but, that's just how a person decided to write it. So right there, Lot was not supposed to go with Abraham. The city that Lot chose to settle in was extremely wicked. There's a lot of crazy shit going down where they were locking the young men out of the city gates in Sodom, Gomorrah, and Siwa Oasis to force them to be gay and to forcibly make sure that all men living in the city gates can have harems. It's an exceedingly wicked place where the women were just for breeding and work, doing most of the work. That's it. Forcing us. And, those are the wicked kind of places that's the wicked kind of place that Lot, who was not even supposed to go with Abraham, that's where Lot chose to settle. Sodom, Gomorrah, Siwa Oasis, with a lot of forced homosexuality and bisexuality, and by locking the young men out and guaranteeing polygamy. And so in the end, Lot, because he's not obedient, because he's got a different mentality, instead of moving quickly to a place where his 2 daughters can have a life, the minute his wife's gone, he's just, his daughters are all up on him. He's all up on them, fucking both of them in a cave, isolating, instead of getting them to other people where they can have a life. So it's amazing how they have this miraculous rescue. And instead of moving to a place where they can live well, they stop. They stay stationary, and then they do something that sets the bar even lower, way lower than what God tolerated. Both of them fucking their own dad. So with that said, in the story of Abraham and Sarai, there's a lot of stuff that God tolerates in the beginning that he doesn't tolerate later on, because these people, they don't know any better. They don't know no better. And then finally, when Sarah does eventually get pregnant, the womb of every single woman in the house is closed up, and no one's in the house of Abimelech is able to get pregnant. Like, not one female in the house of Abimelech is able to get knocked up. And I believe that happens. I believe everyone in the house of Abimelech becomes sterile and unable to get pregnant, because I believe that's God's way of saying, hey, these other women, the way that they think, the way that they do their parenting, whether it's their temperament, their genetics, their attitude, whatever the differences may be, with him making all of the women in the house of Abimelech unable to get pregnant, before Sarah bears her child, that's like God's way of saying, okay, yes, you other females might be stepping to her husband, throwing your legs open, thinking you're going to build up a legacy, that you're going to be the inheritance. And with him closing up their wombs so they couldn't do that, that's like God's way of saying, no, I'm not building the future on your children. They might become a great nation. They might get blessed. But I'm not building the future on them. That's making a strong point. And in the example of Lot, who was not even supposed to go in the first goddamn place, because Abraham was supposed to leave everything. Lot wasn't supposed to be there. It was probably some other better man or better family who might have joined them later. But we don't know that, because Abraham and Sarai, they just did what was common to the people and made money doing it. Basically, borderline living as swingers. But I'm going to clarify what I mean by God not building the future on those other women. Because again, we don't know what it was about Sarah that was different from the other women, because she was married to her half brother. We don't know what the difference is. But when we look at Hagar, who's the mother of Muhammad, who was a pedophile and the father of Islam. Okay, when we look at that, we can see why Hagar was not chosen to be the mother of the new world. When we look at Lot, who laid up in a cave having sex with both of his young adult daughters as soon as his wife died, instead of quickly moving on to make a new life for them somewhere else. Okay, yeah, we can see why Lot was not chosen to be the father of the new world. And let me say hold on. Because again, there's a lot of ignorance of many different kinds that God tolerated. And even the female servant who got pregnant by Abraham and nearly passed off another man's wife as the heir to the nation. Okay, well, God, he didn't even speak on them saying, oh, you're some faithless people still trying to take things into your own hands. He didn't do that. But let me look at one more thing here that I want to point out in talking about the deliverance of Sarah out of Ur of the Chaldees, out of Babylon, out of the place where they were both pagans and where it was very common and very socially acceptable to marry a half-sibling or first cousin, like we still see in a lot of families in the modern world today, unfortunately. All right, so I'm going to point out one last thing about how in this deliverance, the standard was so low. Okay, now here's the thing about Ishmael, okay? Here's the thing about Ishmael. Now, a lot of people keep talking about Ishmael being a son of Abraham because man worship is not just common to Black people. It may be a little worse among Black people, but most cultures, they're focused on a lot of man worship. So this year, prophecy is going to be fulfilled by the sacrifice returning to the Temple Mount. And they're going to have the sons of Ishmael to do it, right? But here in the book of Genesis, God says he's going to make a great nation out of Ishmael, but Ishmael will not be the foundation that Israel's built upon. He's not. Because again, there's reasons for that. Like, it's Muhammad, who married a 9-year-old, was born from Ishmael. Okay. This, clearly there was zero elevation of standards in the generations born from Hagar. Now, so in the book of Genesis, chapter 17, God is speaking to, let me see. God is speaking to Abraham about these two children because Sarah finally gives birth, and Ishmael, he's mocking and getting ready to bully the child, getting fully geared up to bully the child, and it's still a baby. Okay. And then the mama Hagar, she's pissed off because now there's this competition. There's this other little boy. And so God is speaking to Abraham, and he says, "And as for Ishmael, I have heard you, and behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes he will conceive, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah will bear to you at this set time in the next year." And he left off talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. So right here in the book of Genesis, chapter 17, verses 20 and 1, he's saying, yes, I'll make a great nation of Ishmael. Yes, princes will be born from Ishmael. But my covenant will be with Isaac, the son of Sarah. Because again, we see with Hagar, the generations born to her produced Muhammad, who married a 9-year-old. But with Sarah, there was some kind of difference with her. The covenant is with the son of Sarah, not with the son of Hagar. So we can see there's blessings on the other children of Abraham, those who were actually his real kids and not some other man's baby. But even though they're blessed and they're made great, they're still not under the covenant, because in the covenant, we see a gradual raising of standards with time. Okay? And when we fast forward to when Isaac is a young man and his mother has died, Isaac does not sit in his father's house saying, "Oh, let me do what my parents did and marry a biological sister because she has a different mama, and we'll be swingers and we'll get all this money and female servants and men servants because she's so beautiful." No, he didn't do that. With Isaac, we can clearly see that God's plan was successful, because after his mother dies, Isaac, he travels. He goes away to a different household and selects a cousin from a different territory to become his wife. And not only selects a cousin instead of a half-sibling, he basically does a quick test to see which one of those girls is going to do right without being asked. And the girl who offers him water, but also offers his camels water too, showing kindness and care to the animals as well, that's the one who becomes his wife. Because Isaac, he's got standards. He's not trying to inbreed as narrowly as his parents, and he wants to make sure he has a girl of good character. a girl who has compassion and not a swinger. And so in here, we see the son of the covenant raising his standards, where he marries a young adult who's still a virgin and not his half sister. But with the son of the other woman, Hagar, we see little or no raising of the standards, where we have Muhammad born to her and he marries a 9-year-old. And we don't know how that 9-year-old may or may not have been related to Muhammad or not. I haven't read the Quran, so I don't know. But Isaac is not a pedophile, and Isaac had a higher standard than his parents. And when we look at another culture for an example, let's look at Hindus. In Hinduism, they say that a woman is supposed to spend her pregnancy resting and praying and not being emotionally assaulted and exposed to a lot of other people, because people can be so nasty, especially to pregnant women. And in Hindu culture, they say that a woman should rest and be protected from being emotionally assaulted by other people, and pray specific prayers in the hope that they will get a child who is better than the mother and the father. Okay. Now, but in the case of Sarai, it was God fighting to deliver Abram and Sarai out of their life as swingers, out of that life where it's socially acceptable to take a half sibling as a spouse. And Isaac is the proof. Isaac is the proof of success, because nobody has to push him and beg with him. He don't have to have God opening up the sky saying, "Oh, get out of your father's house." No, Isaac leaves his father's territory willingly to find a bride. And and in later generations, and when I'm going to talk about the deliverance of the other 3 mothers, we're going to clearly see a move to a standard even higher than the standard that Isaac was at, where no longer is there marriage to a first cousin. We're going to see a move away from the first cousin marriage. Everything's building up in steps. And so these people, these pagan, very inbred people, that was the norm. It was socially acceptable. It was common. And the first Exodus is the first step away from that, with clear and obvious proven success through Isaac of the covenant and not through Ishmael, who is blessed but also not under the covenant with God. So with that said, the sacrifice that's supposed to return to the Temple Mount on September 27th of this year, fulfilling end times prophecy, that is actually in error. It's actually wrong. The Torah clearly states that Ishmael is blessed but not under the covenant with God. So right there we can clearly see that they're going to include a son in the covenant with God who was never supposed to be included in the first place, because again, there's a difference in how they think. There's a difference in how they live. There might even be a difference genetically, but whatever the case is, God didn't judge them for that difference. They have their own separate blessing, and they are not under that covenant in Jerusalem. They're still just fighting and killing and doing whatever they got to do, trying to get the whole planet to back them up on doing this thing that is at this sacrifice on the 27th that is not approved. They're talking about trying to reaffirm God's covenant with the whole world. Okay, well, God is not under covenant with the whole world. God is only under covenant with Isaac and only Isaac. And it's God's will for this bloodline of Isaac that gradually meets higher standards with time. It's God's will for them to be a blessing to the whole world. But even though it's God's will for them to be a blessing to the whole world, that does not necessarily count as a covenant. It's just God's will for the world. Does that mean he has a covenant with the whole world? No, he only has a covenant with Isaac. So these Islamists who are planning to reintroduce the sacrifice to the Temple Mount in September of this year, they're actually overstepping their boundaries. Yes, you can receive blessings, but that don't mean you're under a covenant, because it's the seed of Isaac that's being pushed harder and put through higher standards. These other families from the other bloodlines, yes, they get blessed, but they're not being pushed to meet higher standards if they don't want to, because they're not part of the bloodline. They're not part of that original covenant. So I guess that's now what we maybe might see, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, because, well, no, actually I've had angelic beings to show me something about a lightning storm of the century in my dreams. And also there were also spirits that were not angelic, that were either nature spirits or demonic spirits. It's probably the same thing, because I look at it more like from the Asian perspective, where the demonic spirits are just nature spirits or people or both. But anyway, I heard from both types of spirits about a lightning storm of the century, which might occur in September, the same month that these sons of Ishmael are going to commit this offense, because the Muslims and also the whole world is backing them on some things that's not right, and also not mentally understanding the things that are not right. They're not willing to understand it. They're not willing to accept it. So during that month when they commit this offense, we might see a lightning storm of the century. And I've seen something about a really, really bad lightning storm in my dreams from angelic beings, but also I've heard about it from beings who are not angelic as well. And I don't know if this is accurate or not, but hey, we'll just see. So this concludes my commentary on the first night of Passover, talking about the first Exodus, which was the Exodus of Abram and Sarai, who both were required to meet very, very, very low standards as pagans and half siblings married to each other, like a lot of people today.